switchgear on the left for the pumps. This picture was taken on the east side of the plant. The power feed to that side of the plant was totally corroded away, and we could not replace it in kind back in the ground. And in order to save money and expedite the repair, we completely redid the power feed, but had to run it across some of the tanks just because we had to. There was no other way to go around it. That's a modification we had to make to our excess flow facility. You're looking at a discharge hose coming out of the side of the tank. Part of the problem there was when we have excess flow and we have two excess flow pumps constantly running, it can overflow the tank, and it's kind of a safety valve that we installed ourselves to help eliminate that problem. That's our current grit collector. That's been in service since 1986. It's been rebuilt twice under the water. You're looking at the housing that holds the mechanism that transports the grit once it's collected out of the water to a dumpster. Basically, I took that, if you could see the bottom where it meets that's a better shot of it right there. That's kind of what's left of the housing as present day. That didn't show up too well. This is our preliminary treatment building, the same building that the grit collector is in. The corrosive atmosphere in this building, basically from hydrogen sulfide gas, is eating away at the mortar of the building, and that's basically what that photo is showing. That's a little bit better picture. It's kind of hard. It's not a lot of room in this building, but you can see the white streaks and then the dark streaks on the wall. And that's where the grit collector dumps into the dumpster.
Okay.
I just have a question on the last slide, if
Go
I
ahead.
can. Okay, so what am I seeing here? Is that normal operating procedure for something to dump into a dumpster?
Yes.
Or what's the bad part about this?
Well, basically, it's the grit collector is not dewatering the grit properly. If you notice the holes we've had to drill in the sides of the dumpster for the water to dewater the grit in the dumpster. Problem with this is it really doesn't meet state code, and we are very lucky that our garbage collector even takes it because it tends to. Yeah, and that's
Okay.
why you see the grit on the floor. Also, if he overfills his truck and pulls out of our plant and has to stop suddenly, it ends up on the street. So that's why they don't like to take it that wet.
Okay.
Okay, so now we will let HR Green, which is also West Smith, now it's HR Green since they merged companies. So we will have them take you through a presentation. After the presentation, we will open it up to questions. And I believe staff and our in-house engineer also attended meetings. We will give a recommendation what we feel that will be fit, and then we'll take it from there. But we'll have plenty of time for questions. So, all right. You want to take it, Mark?
Yeah, I guess what I plan to do is to go through this memo and kind of hit the highlights and kind of the background behind some of our recommendations and our justifications, and then, like Eugene said, open it up for questions here pretty quickly. The first page of the memo, you all have this in your packets, correct? The first page of the memo is the executive summary that provides a pretty good snapshot of overall where we've been, kind of where we're at, and where we're going. The feasibility study that we finished up this spring, the spring of 2010, that feasibility study recommended that the north plant be expanded from 1.47 up to 3.47 MGD, and we had a cost in there of $32.8 million to do do the whole ball of wax, the whole capacity expansion. We then went under contract and we prepared a preliminary design, a 30% design of that full expanded plant, with always knowing that we're going to get to this point right now where we're going to decide if we're going to do a portion of that or just what portion that we're going to move forward with. But doing that preliminary design was going to give us a roadmap. This is what the plant's going to look like if we do the whole expansion, but we can do portions of that, but have a roadmap to follow to get there. So we recently completed that preliminary design, and we have, which is this, I believe that many of you have seen that or it was in the packet, that basically lays out the equipment and the building footprints and the piping and 30% of the way there of the design of the whole thing. As a result of that, we did a cost estimate, an opinion of probable construction cost, and came in at $34.2 million for the whole plant, based off quantity takeoffs and actual building heights and walls and footage of piping and whatnot. We are still carrying a 15% contingency on that cost, so typically as we go through the final stages of design, we knock down that contingency. So right now we're above our study cost, but in reality that number could come down. So we plan for the future. Now we're at the stage where we're, what do we build now? What do we, to meet our needs? What's our next step? So this memo outlines what we recommend, which is we're calling it the phase 1 of the project, and we're staying at the 1.97 plant capacity and designing the pumps and the piping and whatnot for that lower flow. We can expand to the higher flow later on without having to build new concrete and buried structures and underground piping, but right now the equipment and the pumping is sized for the lower flow. What are we including in that phase 1? Consists of the final clarifier. Ed will point to them. Final clarifier, aeration tank addition, and secondary control building, the raw sewage pump station, a preliminary treatment building, excess flow treatment facility, and standby generator. And we're recommending the phase 1, that project, and the cost of that is $20.2 million. Then the other thing that we need to keep in mind, and that for future considerations, we do have some solids handling. There are some other improvements that have equipment that's showing some deficiencies, but they didn't make the first priority list. That's a secondary priority list. And then the 3 other options on here, the secondary treatment, the tertiary filters, and the UV disinfection, those are some things that could come into play later on down the road due to IEPA future regulations. So we're set up to be able to handle those. The plant has capacity, can be expanded to handle those, but they're not included in that $20.2 million at this time. So phase 1 improvements, some of you may be asking, there was talk about we were at a $10 million project, now we're at a $20.2 million project. Why did we get from 10 million to 20 million? I guess the answer to that is just as we drilled into it and got more information and looked into more of the deficiencies and met with city staff and plant staff, we came up with, there was more additional items that got added to the priority list to meet our goal. And our goal is to be able to operate the plant reliably and meet the permit limits for the next 20 years. With some of the work that we had outlined in that initial preliminary project that came out of the study, the $10 million project, we can't with confidence say that $10 million is going to solve the problem and that we won't have issues down the road, is the short answer. A couple of things. So the price didn't just go up because we did a new cost estimate. We've added more equipment For example, we have new screening equipment inside the new raw sewage pump station that's going to allow some of the rags and other debris to be taken out of the waste stream before the pumps. And that's going to protect the pumps, and it's going to allow them to run more efficiently. Currently, we don't have we have a manual screen in front of those existing raw sewage pumps, but they can't run as efficiently as the new updated system would be, because we have to run them at full speed to chop up the rags and make them run full speed all the time. They have the equipment that they could run lower, but at lower speeds, but we can't run it that way just because of the operation and maintenance issues we have. Another example of what we added to get to the $10 million is grit removal. You saw some of the pictures, some of the efficiencies. That system isn't moving the amount of grit that we would like to, that would more fully protect our equipment, our investment that we're going to be putting in. It's not going to protect that downstream equipment because some of the sand and the abrasive materials are still going to be there, and it's going to cause things to wear out sooner and increase O&M costs. So those are a couple of the larger examples. The pretreatment building also has some advantages in that there's less wasted cost. I went into pretty high level detail towards the end of the memo on some of those wasted costs about having to relocate electrical equipment if we don't build our new electrical room in the initial phases. In other words, if we wait till later phases to build a new electrical room, we have to temporarily put equipment, and then we have to move that equipment in the next phase, because eventually we want to build that preliminary treatment building at some point. If we don't do it this phase, we're going to want to do it the next phase, because that's where the grit removal equipment is located. So, it's not a huge. I think if you look at some of the costs, it amounts to a few $100,000. It's not a deal breaker. You could justify it either way, but it is worth mentioning that you can save some of those wasted costs. The existing generator room and electrical room is actually located in the floodplain, and the elevation of that floor can get flooded. So if we do keep it, we're going to recommend that we build some flood protection around it. So it's just another wasted cost and not a good. You wouldn't design it that way new at this time. So the three major things that we added are the raw sewage pump station, the preliminary treatment building, and then the excess flow treatment facility and the preliminary treatment go together because the existing excess flow facility is located where the new preliminary treatment building is going to go. So they kind of run hand in hand. And then also the raw sewage pump station and the excess flow kind of go hand in hand also, because there can be some definite control, less manpower. Brad and plant staff have some pretty significant issues about when we have high flow conditions where they have to manually babysit this plant to get the water directed over to the excess flow facility, and we don't know when those high flows come. It's nights, weekends, wherever. He has to go there and babysit. But a combination of these two facilities, it'll be much more automated, much more reliable, and not have more discharges to the excess flow facility than he would need to have if it's operating correctly. So those three things are what bumped our cost from the $10 million to the $20 million. And I think that's where I'm going to stop now for questions.
Okay, part of that $20 million is also, if I am mistaken, it's 15% retainer fee still in there.
Yes, we still are carrying a contingency.
So we're still carrying 15% for overruns. So it may not be $20 million if we don't not hit the overrun on this project.
Correct.
Brad, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I will put you on the spot. The meetings that we sat through, since you have, how many years with the treatment plant?
Almost 30.
30 years that the guy runs our treatment plant, and he pretty much knows what he's got. Yeah, we did make some changes that Brad wanted in that. We thought this, we did consider all the info that we took from this, all the aldermen here on, obviously, the $38 million treatment plant was not feasible. Brad sat down with the people here, and this is what we came up with. Our own engineer sat in two of our meetings, and could you care to address that? Is this pretty much what you agree on should go forward, or?
Good evening. I'm Larry Thomas with Baxter and Woodman. We have taken a look at the proposal. Doing the entire treatment plant and setting up is the $34 million project, and that provides your nutrient removals and so forth, which we don't have to do quite yet. So what we looked at was phasing the project so that we could have a more cost-effective project to start off with. And that's what the project that they're presenting you tonight. It takes care of the operational issues with the existing treatment plant and meeting the existing standards that the treatment plant has to meet. When the nutrient standards are put into place in a few years from now for total nitrogen removal, for phosphorus removal, that's when you'll need to look at doing the second phase of the improvements, because it's with those phases that you will be removing the additional nutrients that will be in play at that time. So this two-phase project is our most cost-effective way to do it. If we break it into too many phases, as they were pointing out, you end up with having to redo things. Your costs become higher because you're doing smaller incremental projects. You're not getting the scale that you need to be able to have a good-sized project. So we've tried to optimize it to bring you the least cost project we do to start off with, but then to be prepared to go into the next phase, the final phase, when the nutrient program comes into place, when at which time it is necessary to do so.
Okay. And now, Alderman Roy Wesley.
When you're talking phases, phase one, how long could these phases go in when you're saying one phase, two phase?
On the project breakdown as we have now, our first phase would be to get the plant up and running. After that, these additional items for future considerations, those could be really individual phases for those as needed. And that would be really the difference between the $20 million project and the 34.
Let me rephrase this. How many years would it, how many years can I stretch $20 million?
The $20 million project should be implemented as one phase, one project to
Okay.
start with. And as far as the repayment on that one, that would be something to discuss with Brad.
Are you talking about? Are you? Alderman Musial.
I think we're thinking on the same page. First phase, if you do the first phase, the plant is good for, let's say EPA never wants nitrogen and phosphorus taken out. That first phase is good for 40 years, 50 years? Is that what you're looking for? Right? Or only good for 10 years or 5 years?
Well, our typical design period is 20-year design period, but that's more for equipment and mechanical items, but concrete and pipe in the ground, can go much longer than that. So the first $20 million will handle the deficiencies, but I want to point out that the solids handling is quite a bit higher priority than the nutrient removal, the secondary treatment, the tertiary filters, and the UV disinfection. The solids handling is another phase of the project that is related to defective equipment and things that need to be taken care of. It's just a lower priority, and we're treating more on the liquid side. The solids handling is more on the sludge, on the solid side. So the 20 million will get us 20 years plus, obviously, but the solids handling isn't gonna, we need to do something before 20 years on the solids handling, for sure.
There's your,
But you're, in this first phase, you're doing the solids handling. It's right here, increase solids handling capacity. Aeration tank, item number 2.
I guess I'm not sure what you're looking at.
What you're saying, I don't know if I understood you right, saying we're gonna have to do something to the part of the plant that handles the solids. So we're not doing that here right now?
Not in the first phase. It's didn't meet the first set of priority lists. We're trying to spread it out. This is our attempt to spread out that cost of the improvements over a longer period.
So on item number 2 here, it says increase solids handling capacity. Right here on the,
Page 5.
am I looking at that wrong?
Yeah, that's more, it's still in the aeration tank and I'm gonna let Ed handle that.
It is or isn't.
Without being technical terms.
Alderman Roy Wesley, I apologize, I'm going to speak engineer for a little bit on this one. The aeration tanks have 2 main problems right now. The combination of the secondary treatment, which includes aeration tanks and the clarifiers. They have 2 deficiencies right now, but the main one is in the clarifiers, the solids that get returned from there back to the aeration tanks. And that's the bacterial mass that you're treating this with. It goes in the aeration tanks, it's mixed with your raw sewage as food, goes into clarifiers, it settles down and is pumped back. Those are the solids in there. That term, instead of solids, should actually say RAS, or return activated sludge. It's those solids that are maintained in the system for treatment. Now, the solids handling system that's being discussed up here as a future item is excess solids are generated. Every day we add more, solids loading to it. So we waste some out, and then that has to be digested and dried. And currently it's digested into 4 digester tanks, and it goes to the belt filter press for drying and is stored in a shed. Well, the existing solids handling system, the digesters are under capacity to meet current requirements, and it would be better if they could be thickened so we could increase the concentration of the sludge to make a more efficient digestion process. That would be the solids handling portion that would be in the next phase. And when we went down the priority list, we had to cut off somewhere. And that was the item that current operations, Brad is able to handle the solids. But as we go a little further on this process and we have to start doing biological nutrient removal, we'll be increasing our sludge production rates, and our current system will be really overloaded instead of just partially overloaded like they are now. But the current system that is there now does not meet the IEPA's current guidelines. We could not build that or permit it and build it with our current loading. We would have to have a larger capacity. But through Brad's operational skills there, he's able to make that work. And there's a number of things out there he's been making work for years that this project is intended to help solve some of those problems.
So I guess just one, so the solids that we're not addressing are the solids that settle out. The solids that is mentioned in this item 2 is the floatable solids that are the bugs that we use for our treatment process, is another way to put it. So there's some settleable solids, the ones that settle out at the bottom of the clarifiers. Those are the ones that is in the second level priority that we're not addressing in this phase 1.
Actually, I saw that in the book where, right, you got the stuff on the bottom. So what happens Are we removing that stuff on the bottom, or is it just always? It just, because you got some kind of arm I saw that turns in there or something.
That collects.
Mark it in.
As that goes around, on the bottom of that tank, it moves the sludge around to a sump, and that's where the return activated sludge pumps pump back to the front of the aeration cell. We reuse those solids or bugs to eat more organics in the wastewater. But eventually, as these bugs eat, they multiply, and you get too many. Once you get too many bugs, if you don't remove some, eventually your clarifier, instead of separating the solids to the bottom and the clear water at the top, it would just fill up with solids and overflow and go out to the creek. So every day, we have to waste a certain amount of sludge depending on lab results. That goes to the digesters, and we further digest that to decrease the amount of solids. And then we dewater that some more, and then finally goes to the belt press, and that gets dewatered there because we want to increase the concentration as much as possible because it costs us less the smaller quantity of sludge we have to land apply. I hope I didn't confuse you more.
Well, with what we're doing, are we getting rid of that problem with the dumpster and the garbage company? Or, because
Yes.
sooner or later, that's gonna come back to haunt us.
Yeah,
It is in the first phase. That's what we changed.
But basically what they're trying to tell you is that even with the first phase, the solids handling is going to have to be looked at sooner than later. So for the 20-year project, it's not going to last 20 years, especially if nutrient removal comes to pass and we have regulations for that. That'll increase our solids digestion-wise about 20%. And we're just hanging on right now at current levels, so.
also, one of the first slides that showed the chlorine contact tank and the corrosion of the concrete there, that's a project that we're not even able to get to at this time. We would have to get to really the last item on our future conditions for the UV disinfection to solve that problem. So there's still a long list of things to do at the plant, but they all cost money.
And the reason, and I'll be totally honest with you, the reason why we did not put the whole entire thing is we listened to this council quite clearly that they didn't want to do everything all at once. So we took whatever thought Brad Kilson wanted to get the treatment plant where it is. And our own engineer said eventually there's going to have to be more money put into this treatment plant to continue to bring it up to standards that it's going to have to be. We addressed all the concerns that every council member had up here, and this was our phase that we came up with. We picked the items that we thought was more critical. We talked about getting rid of chlorine before. Nuzio, you brought up the point that we were going to get rid of chlorine. That could be down the line in the second phase or third phase when we get that far. So, I mean, that's why I only put those pictures in there just for you guys.
Go ahead, you go first.
Alderman Roy Wesley.
That's what I thought these pictures are, what we're talking about here for the $20 million. So now you're just throwing everything in a loop here because that's, Brad, nothing against you, but I'm looking at these pictures and stuff and I'm thinking this is what is all going to be fixed.
The only thing
So,
that in this
I mean-
picture, the only thing that were in these pictures that Brad put in these pictures that are not being replaced is the chlorine tanks.
Then show me what is going to be, show me in the pictures
All
what's
right,
being replaced.
Show the pictures eliminating the chlorine tank. And the only reason why he put the chlorine tanks in there, because he felt that you guys should know down the line they would have to be.
I
He's
understand
going to
that.
show you, take out the chlorine tanks.
I understand that, but Alderman Wesley, you're asking for $20 million possibly for tonight. I want to know what
Okay.
$20 million is going to pay
Go
for.
back up to the chlorine tanks. That is not being replaced. Go to the next tape. That is not being That is not being replaced. That's 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 being replaced.
Everything else.
That's being replaced. That's being replaced. That's being replaced. Everything but the chlorine tanks are being replaced.
And
On the
that,
new zone.
just as a side note, that chlorine tank is original to the plant from back in the 50s.
New Zero Police.
All right, the chlorine tanks, I got it. They're not being done. So maybe I'm understanding this wrong or maybe not. So if EPA wants this phosphorus and nitrogen, we put in these tertiary filters in, does that remove the chlorine tanks? Is that why the chlorine tanks are not in here right now? Because they might eventually be removed? Or am I understanding it right?
Yeah, the combination of tertiary filters and UV disinfection would replace the chlorine tank and would give you also the tertiary filtration. So more than likely, that's going to be a requirement with future IEPA limits, and that will trigger that having to be done at some point.
But not at this time.
So the bottom line is, the reason we're not taking out the chlorine tanks is because we're not putting in those other filters at this point. Because I read, I did get something in the mail, you know, we get these flyers, and I think it was Baxter and Woodman's flyer that talked about chlorine tanks eventually having to go.
Yes, it's,
So basically, either keep the chlorine tanks or you have the tertiary filters, which is another, whatever, $7 or $10 million.
well, the UV disinfection is what replaces the chlorine. But look, chlorine gas for disinfection is a process that it's not being designed in new plants, and it is being eliminated in most plants when they can. But at a lot of places, it only costs money to do it is the thing. And right now, nobody is forcing you to do that. And operationally, it is effective at disinfection.
And can I ask you a question? Those walls, I mean, we saw those cracks going across. I mean, how long do you think those walls are going to hold up with the, like, yeah. I mean,
We did make one repair to save this tank or make it last a little bit longer, and you really can't see it very well in this picture, but if you look right along here,
right.
we actually chipped away about 4 to 5 inches at the top of this tank and re-poured that to keep it together, and that's been working so far.
How long ago was that?
4 years ago.
A few years?
I want to say that was probably about 8 years ago.
So are we going to get 10 more years out of this, or we might only get 2 more years? I'm just curious. Or are you, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. You might not know, so.
Well, yeah, I'm not really a structural engineer, but I would, operational experience, I would say probably yes.
Yeah. Additional repairs could occur on the concrete to extend the, the useful life, to a 10-year period would be a feasible expectation for that tank, yes.
Mayor Johnson.
I just want to clarify something the chairman said, no pun intended, but the clarifier is not being replaced. Is that correct?
We are adding a third clarifier to the 2 existing.
And the existing one is not being replaced?
The existing clarifiers are not being replaced.
Okay.
We
Just
are
want-
adding,
Just so there's no misunderstanding. Okay.
These are existing clarifiers that are going to remain in operation.
Right. We adding one.
Both those were installed in '86, and the concrete structure is fine with those at this time.
On the aesthetic picture that we have here on the right, is the 2 new buildings and what appears to be a brick screening wall, is that included in the $34.2 million price?
Yes. It's also included in the $20
It's all in
million.
20.
This is actually the phase 1, a rendering of the phase 1. So this is this clarifier, right? This is Irving Park Road, and this is the clarifier, and would be this clarifier right here. So the rendering shows the screening wall to go around to screen out this, And this is the new pump station, which is right here. And then this is the new secondary control building, which is right here. So you're looking at this at an angle about like this.
And then my follow-up to that is, what is the distance between the new building and the Veterans Memorial?
Right. I believe that's around 30 feet, if I remember
So
correctly.
that's going in that grassy area to the east of the parking lot?
Yes, this is the same access.
Actually, it's going in the parking lot itself.
Oh, okay.
So
So it
this
doesn't infringe on the, well, you said it was 30 feet from the memorial. So it doesn't infringe on that green land, green space, grassy area at all?
No.
Okay.
We taking out. I believe we taking out, when we went out there and it's already been staked out, if you want to take a walk out there, it's taking away some of those, the parking lot, a couple parking spaces on coming in the main entrance for
yeah,
you.
there's some trees being removed in this area.
Well, we're gonna replace the trees
Yeah.
somewhere else.
There's new trees showing there, so.
Then I have,
Go ahead. Mayor.
sorry, I have some questions on your executive summary, starting on page 2. On the first paragraph, additional